Hello, children. Today I'm going to take your next lesson in English Supplementary Reader. This is lesson number 7, and the name of the lesson is The Open Window, written by H. Munro by the pen name Saki. So before we get into the lesson, as usual, let's have a small peek into the life of the author of this lesson. Hector Hugh Munro, better known by the pen name Saki, was known as H. Munro. He was a British writer who was very witty, mischievous, and has written many short stories. Apart from being a writer, he has also served in the British Army. Besides writing short stories, he has written full-length play as well. So now let's get into the lesson. Our first character is Mr. Frampton Nuttall. Now Frampton Nuttall was suffering from a nervous disorder. And children, whenever someone suffers from nervous disorder, little or small things makes the person so nervous that he faints. As Frampton Nuttall was facing a lot of nervous problem, he was getting excited or angered very frequently. Very easily he would get frightened, or very easily he would get afraid. So his doctors suggested him to go to a calm and quiet place which is not in the city. So Frampton Nuttall decided that he is going to spend some of his years in relaxation, and in order to get a good treatment, he thought of visiting a village. Now this village which he has selected, where his elder sister was living a few years ago, and Frampton's sister knew Frampton very well. She knew that Frampton is a very shy man and he will never go out of his house to make friendship with other person, and his problem of nervousness, instead of getting cured, it may become worse and may cause a severe problem for his health. So his sister writes some letters of introduction so that Frampton may find it easy to introduce himself as his sister's brother who was living in the same village. So in this manner he can become friendly with a lot of people in the village. So Frampton comes to the village, and one evening he decides to go to meet one of the friend whose name was suggested by Frampton's sister, and this is Mr. and Mrs. Sappleton. Frampton goes and knocks at the door. The door is opened by a young 15-year-old girl named Vera. She was a very calm and confident girl. She told Nuttall to come inside and make himself comfortable on the sofa. So she makes him sit on the sofa, and she tells Frampton Nuttall, that her aunt, Mrs. Sappleton, would come downstairs very soon. So the time when Frampton had gone, it was evening time, and Mrs. Sappleton was getting ready because visitor Frampton had come. So she was getting ready upstairs. Now as Vera and Frampton are talking to one another, the young girl Vera asks Frampton whether he knows anyone in the village. To this, Frampton replies that he does not know anybody, and in order to make a lot of friendship in this village with the people of this village, his sister had sent letters of introduction. Now his sister had lived in this village 4 years ago, so she knew quite a lot of people in the village, and that's why she had sent letters of introduction to Frampton so that he can introduce himself with the friend circle of Frampton's sister. Frampton tells that he knows only her aunt's name and address, and he doesn't know anything about the aunt or her family, or how many people are there in this Sappleton's family. Now here, children, you are going to see how a small girl tries to build up a story. So Vera then tells Frampton that a big tragedy had happened in the family 3 years ago. She points out, she shows a large glass window which opened onto a lawn. It was a big window and there were no iron rods in between. Any person can go and come in. It was like a small mini door, but it was a window. And she told Frampton that her aunt always kept the window wide open. So Frampton is curious to know whether there is any link with the tragedy and the window. The girl then tells Frampton that her aunt's husband and two brothers had gone out for shooting. They had gone out for hunting. This exactly happened on this particular month of October 3 years ago. They went out through this particular window and they have never come back. Then Vera tells Frampton they had got the news that while they were returning after hunting, they got swallowed up by the wet spongy ground. It means that while coming back, they were caught in a bog. Now what is a bog? It is a wet, muddy, marshy ground which pulls a person down when somebody is caught up in a bog. So when they were returning from the hunting, they accidentally stepped onto the bog and all the three of them got buried alive and their bodies were still not recovered. The girl then tells that, and this is why Mrs. Sappleton always keeps this window open. She believes that her husband and her brothers, along with their dog, are going to come back through the window, and that is why she always keeps that large window open. Even if it is getting dark, she will not allow the window to be shut. Vera then tells that sometimes she also gets the feeling that those three people who had died 3 years ago, they are going to come through the window one day or the another. While they are talking, suddenly Mr. Frampton sees that Mrs. Sappleton is coming from her room upstairs. She comes all of a sudden and hurriedly and she apologizes. Apologizes means asks sorry for being late. And then she asks Frampton whether the large open window is bothering him. So maybe Mr. Frampton was not comfortable, maybe he was feeling cold, and that's why Mrs. Sappleton asks whether he has any problem because that large window is open. And then she tells Frampton that this window is kept open because her husband and her two brothers who have gone out for shooting, that is hunting, they would come through this open window. They are in the habit of going out for hunting birds and they always come through this open window. They never use the door. And while they are coming, their boots, their shoes, their clothes, everything will be covered with marsh. They would always spoil the carpet with their muddy shoes, but they never try to come through the door. While Mrs. Sappleton is talking about the shooting and the shortage of birds and how her husband and her brothers are going on shooting, that is hunting for birds every day, Frampton Nuttall feels very horrible. He feels that he is becoming nervous, he is losing his senses. He tries to talk or he tries to change the topic, but he is not successful in changing the topic because Mrs. Sappleton is not ready to listen to what Mr. Frampton is telling. She keeps on telling about the window, about her lawn, about her carpet, and about her husband and brother's behavior of coming through the window. Although Frampton tells Mrs. Sappleton that he is a sick man and doctor had advised him not to take any mental excitement because he is really physically very weak, and in order to gain strength he has come to a calm and peaceful place. And Frampton Nuttall thought that living in this village he can regain his strength, his physical strength. He will be cured from his nervous illness and weaknesses. But Mrs. Sappleton did not pay any attention to what Mr. Frampton was speaking. Suddenly, she looked towards the window. And then she lets out a cry. She shouts, "Oh my God, they have come at last. See, they have come for the right time for tea." Children, she was talking about her husband and her brothers who were fully covered with mud and they were coming towards the window. At this time, Frampton Nuttall trembled with fear. He was shaking with fear because he could also see a few people, the outline of few people, three muddy people. They're walking towards the window. He turned towards the girl to look what she was doing. She also had horror in her eyes. Looking at her horrifying face, Frampton also felt a strange fear inside him. He turned around and saw that those three people were slowly coming towards the window and all carried big guns. They were followed by a small brown colored dog. And one of them was singing a song, "I say, birdie, why do you bound?" As Frampton was unable to sit any longer because he was so shocked and terrified, he picked up his stick and his coat and he started walking towards the hall door. As he was rushing towards the gate and when he opened the front gate, he dashed onto a cyclist. But somehow he managed to get up and he ran to his house. The three people who were walking across the lawn, now they had come through the window, and Mr. Sappleton asked Mrs. Sappleton who was the man who was just now seen running from the home. And Mrs. Sappleton complains that Frampton was an extraordinary man because he could not talk anything other than his illness. And without even saying a word of goodbye or sorry, he just ran out of the house as if he had seen a ghost. That was terrible, which was what Mrs. Sappleton was explaining to Mr. Sappleton. Then Mrs. Sappleton asks Vera whether she knows why Mr. Frampton rushed out so wildly. The girl explains that Frampton was always afraid of dog, which is why when he saw the dog, he ran away. And while they were talking, the girl says that when they were talking in the evening, Frampton had told that once a group of dogs had chased him into a graveyard, and when he was running in the graveyard, he had fallen down into a newly dug grave. The dogs were growling all around him, and that experience in the graveyard with the dogs made him very frightened with the dog, which is why he ran out of the house because he had seen a dog. So as you can see, children, this is how Vera fools not only Mr. Frampton but also her uncle and aunt. She imagines a story which was not at all there. She tells that her uncle and her aunt's brothers are all ghosts. They have died 3 years ago. But actually, this was not the case. And when Mrs. Sappleton wants to know why Frampton had run out of the house, for that also she had an explanation, telling that Frampton was afraid of the dogs, which was again not a true story. Children, with that I come to the end of this lesson.